Picture yourself in a boat on a river with tangerine trees and marmalade skies. Somebody calls you, you answer quite slowly. A girl with kaleidoscope eyes. Cellophane flowers of yellow and green, towering over your head. Look for the girl with the sun in her eyes, and she's gone. Lucy in the sky with diamonds. Newspaper taxis appear on the shore, waiting to take you away. Climb in the back with your head in the clouds, and you're gone. I quote John Lennon and Paul McCartney's song, Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, because I was having a conversation with Rosa about the chosen topic. I wanted to speak about Santa Lucia, St. Lucia, and she said, you know that song, Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds? It may have been inspired by the story of St. Lucia. I said, really? Well, I got on Wikipedia and I started to research St. Lucia. And I found that there are many, many places around the world that are named for St. Lucia because it's an old, old story. So there are islands, mountains, towns, cities, villages, a river or two, a lake, a wildlife sanctuary. There's a mega mall somewhere named after Santa Lucia. So, and in Florida we have St. Lucie County, which was originally St. Lucia County. Once upon a time, there was a person named Lucy of Syracuse who apparently lived from 283 to 304. And we say CE or Common Era instead of AD now, but this is back in Roman days. And she's a Christian martyr who died during the Diocletian persecution. I didn't know what that was, so I looked that up too. The last and most severe persecution of Christians in the Roman Empire. In 303 CE, AD, whatever you want to call it, the emperors decreed Christians' legal rights null and void and demanded that Christians make sacrifices to the traditional gods or suffer the consequences, which could include torture, prison, banishment, death, being sent to the Colosseum and eaten by lions. Stuff that we know from our wonderful, what are they called? Sword and Sandal movies. I watched one a couple of weeks ago on the Classic Movie Channel. It was a story from the Bible, and wonderful movie from the 50s. The sets were not anything special. If you're a theater person like Nancy, you would say nothing special. But the costumes were great, and those guys had great thighs. I'm telling you, wonderful, wonderful thighs on the actors in that film. But it's kind of a stretch of our minds to go back in time to this period when there was this persecution, and yet they say that those who forget history are doomed to repeat it. Here we are in a time where people are again being pointed at and reviled for their religious beliefs. To me, it kind of all comes down to the same thing. Do you follow the golden rule or do you not? Do you love others as yourself? And there's the deeper issue, is how hard it is to love ourselves. I worked with a young man a couple years ago that I personally called Black Cloud under my breath, because I would see him coming and think, oh, here comes Black Cloud. And finally I started to sing to myself to calm me, because we had to share space in our workplace. And it was a fairly big back room, but there he would be and I would be, and I'd have to look at him most of the day. And under my breath I would sing to him, and I've sang this song. Goddess loves you, this I know, though you damage yourself so. Yes, Goddess loves you, yes, Goddess loves you, yes, Goddess loves you, the angels tell me so. And it made me feel better, because because I had the sense that this guy was self-injurious, that he was living somehow a life where he was going to really do great harm to himself. And I had reason to remember this song recently, and I thought, boy, you know, the fact that I stole this melody from the Baptist church Sunday school bus that I used to ride on when I was a little kid doesn't bother me at all. We were talking in the CUP's national board meeting about cultural appropriation. For example, when a European descended person calls themselves a shaman, this is very offensive to many people around the world from indigenous cultures who have a shaman in their culture, and they're saying, who's this white American person calling themselves a shaman? They're stealing our cultural identity and putting it on themselves. And so I looked up cultural appropriation in Wikipedia, and I found out that it's usually only a situation where a major mainstream cultural majority steals from a minority group. So to steal Jesus loves me and turn it into Goddess loves me is not cultural appropriation, because that's a minority group by the standard of right now, stealing from a majority group. So I'm not guilty of cultural appropriation, and I can sing Goddess loves me all I want. But I thought, is this how we teach our children? We should teach our children our best things. What can I share that would be worthy of the children? And so I rewrote Goddess loves me, and now it goes like this. Goddess loves me, this I know, life's a chance to learn and grow. Yes, Goddess loves me, yes, Goddess loves me, yes, Goddess loves me, the angels tell me so. And if someone who I might think of as a black cloud happens to be present, there's another verse. Goddess loves you, this I know, for the angels tell me so. Yes, Goddess loves you, yes, Goddess loves you. And then I thought, well, we're all in this together. So verse 3 would be, Goddess loves us, this we know. Life's a chance to learn and grow. Yes, Goddess loves us. Yes, Goddess loves us. Yes, Goddess loves us. The angels tell us so. And finally, I thought it would be a nice round if it came back to me. Goddess loves me, this I know. So I figured, okay, now I've made it a song that I feel would be acceptable to sing to children. But my bottom line is, it all comes down to, do we love others as ourselves? If we're harming ourselves, naturally we harm other people. Boy, it's really hard to love yourself. It's so easy to look at another person and say, you shouldn't eat that, it's bad for you. Didn't your doctor tell you not to have those? Are you taking care of your blood pressure? Why aren't you? It's so easy to point the finger. It's so hard to look in the mirror and say those things to ourselves. It's so hard to let charity begin at home. Because either we don't do kind things to other people, or we have a tendency to do kind things to other people and neglect and harm the person we are. So the story of St. Lucia is that, she's an interesting person because she's been so venerated over so long. I knew there was some meat in the story that made it worthy, or else there wouldn't be all this long history of veneration. Her story, the legend, which is what we have today, says that she was the child of rich and noble folk, but her father died when she was 5, her mother was ill, and the mother didn't know that Lucia planned to remain a virgin and give her dowry to the poor, because this was a practice that was spreading among Christian women at that time. So Mama arranged marriage to a wealthy young pagan man. Lucy dreamt that St. Agatha told her her mother's illness would be cured by making a pilgrimage to the saint's shrine in another city, and that Lucy's faith would make her the glory of her hometown of Syracuse in Sicily. So they made the pilgrimage. Lucy's mother healed, And Lucy then got her mother to agree to distribute the wealth of the dowry to the poor, which angered her suitor, who cried foul to the governor, who demanded that Lucy make a pagan sacrifice, because this was the time of the Diocletian persecution. Lucy refused to betray her religion, and as punishment, the governor sent her to a brothel where she was defiled. The legend continues that when the guards came to take her away, they could not move her, even when she was hitched to a team of oxen. Bundles of wood were piled about her and set afire, but she would not burn. Finally, she met her death by the sword. And I give all credit to Wikipedia for giving me this information, because I hadn't really heard that part of the story before. What I know is that Rosa said since her family comes from Sicily, and she's been to Syracuse in Sicily, where the patron saint of the town is Santa Lucia, she's seen many, many images of St. Lucia. And she said, you know, she's usually portrayed holding her eyes on a platter, because part of the legend is that the torture of Lucia, which made her a martyr, was that she had her eyes gouged out. So there are many images in churches and stained glass windows and paintings of Lucia with her eyes on a platter, or holding her eyes, or with her eyes in her hand. Another part of the story that I heard from Rosa was that in some versions, they cut off her breasts. And I said, oh no, did they put those on the platter too? It's probably because I watch too much reality TV, and some of it is the surgeons. Anyway, the plastic surgery, never mind. But that's not on the platter, it's just eyeballs. It would be even weirder. Anyway, very surreal. The whole story is very surreal. So Wikipedia says that this part about the eye gorging, it was not really present in the story until the 15th century. So it's quite probable that, like many wonderful legends, Robin Hood and so forth, the legend of Santa Lucia just grew and grew and grew. And the kind of torture that was given to her and the kind of things that could be done to people and the way that she died grew and grew along with the story. My book, 365 Saints, which has a meditation for each day of the year, talks about St. Lucia, or St. Lucy, as she's known, on today, because December 13th is her feast day in the Roman Catholic Church. The part that I liked about the meditation for today, it says that if St. Lucy hadn't had her eyes fixed on heaven, she would certainly have chosen the easier route of marriage. But she was willing to risk all, even death, because she could see beyond the present to the eternal. Often we get so caught up in the hustle and bustle of life that we forget that we too should have our eyes focused on heaven. There's the gift of St. Lucia. Around the world, there are now celebrations of St. Lucia. Originally, the feast day was the 21st of December, which we know is the solstice, the shortest day of the year. So the idea of the light returning after the solstice was connected to the martyr who lost her eyesight. In fact, I discovered there's a Hungarian custom, and I didn't already hear this from Laura. There's a custom that you plant wheat in a small pot, and you do that on December 13th, the feast day of St. Lucia. And by Christmas, there will be sprouts, signs of life coming from death. The wheat is then added to the creche, or the manger scene, as a symbol of rebirth. You've seen this?
No, I haven't.
Okay. Well, Wikipedia says it, so it must be true. There was another thing that I found interesting. Roman Catholic, Anglican, Lutheran, and Orthodox churches all venerate St. Lucia. She is one of 8 women commemorated by name in the canon of the Mass of the Catholic Church, along with Blessed Virgin Mary. So she's a mover and a shaker among souls who are female saints. And that reminded me of Mahalia Jackson, because when I was working in a nursing home in Chicago, I met a little old lady who lived there. And she told me that she had known Mahalia Jackson. And she said when Mahalia Jackson was alive, she would sometimes kind of cause a phone tree. She would call people and say, you know that there's a problem. The problem would be something like hunger or homelessness or whatever, and Mahalia would be asked by people that were doing volunteer drives to gather money or volunteers or goods and help deal with this social problem. So she would call up people. And this lady who lived in the nursing home where I worked told me, she said, I was pleased when she would call me. She thought I was a big enough church lady to get the call. And Mahalia would say, you're going to come to our meeting and help us resolve this problem, aren't you? We can count on you, can't we? So I said, really? She was already a famous celebrity for her singing, but it was the Spirit that moved her, since she was a gospel singer, and she always was looking to make the world a better place. So she activated the phone tree. So I wonder if St. Lucia is on the phone tree among the female saints. She's got to be on the phone tree. She's probably calling a lot of people. Madonna wrote a song called Ray of Light. Zephyr in the sky at night, I wonder, do my tears of mourning sink beneath the sun? She's got herself a universe, gone quickly, for the call of thunder threatens everyone, and I feel like I just got home. Faster than the speeding light she's flying, trying to remember where it all began. She's got herself a little piece of heaven, waiting for the time when the earth shall be as one, quicker than a ray of light, then gone. For someone else will be there through the endless years. Quicker than a ray of light she's flying. Quicker than a ray of light, I'm flying. To me, this is a song about Santa Lucia. It's a song about eat, drink, and be merry. Tomorrow, we're gone like a ray of light. Here we are in a time when again people are being persecuted, and it's up to us to be compassionate souls. Part of my family has a connection to this holiday of St. Lucia because, as Barbara Jean noted, my grandmother, my mom's mother, was born of Swedish parents, though here in Florida, in 1905. She said 1905. I said, why don't you say the O? And my grandmother said, because that's not how we used to say it. You're too young to know this. So she was born here to immigrant parents who came from Sweden with their customs and their culture. And when I learned as a child that St. Lucia Day was the big holiday in Sweden, and the girls put on white dresses, long white robes, and red sashes, and put candles in their hair, and if they have long hair like Martha, they put their hair up into a coiled braid around their head, and then they put a wreath on top of that, and the braids hold the wreath, and the wreath holds the candles, which is really very unsafe. But now we have all kinds of artificial light sources, so there's not this story about, oh, did you hear what happened to Rachel? Her head burned. She was being Lucia on the morning of December 13th, and now she's bald. She burned her hair all off. Happens in Lake Wobegon, too, because of all the Minnesotans that are of Scandinavian heritage. But the story is that my grandmother told me on the morning of Lucia Day, the youngest daughter in the family would put the wreath of candles onto her hair and bring the parents breakfast in bed. And I said, really? That's a lot to do. You got burning candles on your head and a tray of breakfast. Wow. And my grandmother said, yeah, so it was useful if the family kept having more children, because then you didn't have to be the youngest daughter for too long. So I said, well, did great-grandma do that back in Sweden? Did she ever have the candles on her head? And my grandma said, yeah, I think she did, but it was a pretty big family, so the fire danger passed quickly. There was soon enough children for someone else to wear it, the wreath. And they still celebrate, and they celebrate with a story that I heard in years past about some Christians who were being persecuted that were hiding in the catacombs in Rome. And this is the caves where all the bodies were put. And the only place where they could escape persecution was to go hide in the catacombs. So there were people who had been disinherited, who had lost their place in society. Reminds us of the Holocaust a little. And they were hiding in a place where nobody would go, and they didn't have anything to survive with. And the story that I heard associated with St. Lucia Day is about a woman who, like Mahalia Jackson, used her connections and found people to donate food that she could bring to the people who were hiding in the caves. And because they were hiding and didn't have any resources, she got as much food as she could, and by the time she was ready to go into the cave, she couldn't carry it all. So she had to fix her lantern to her headdress so that there would be light in the cave to bring the food to the people. That story inspired me enough that I brought my drawing, which I made as a result of the story. You can look at it during the social hour when we have coffee.
That's nice.
And it still is an inspiration to people around the world who celebrate both the return of the light after the solstice and the spiritual light that tells us to love one another and ourselves as much as we possibly can. Thank you.
Thank you.